that one picture right there, that threw everything into doubt.
Because they didn't think Johnston had those.
Right. They approached 25 shells a minute out of that gun. And during the battle, they used up all of their ammunition. So this is one of them. Now what you're looking at here, at first you might think that's a gun barrel.
Right,
but no,
I did.
That's a gun barrel.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing is a mount upside down, and the mount is on the deck house. So which mount is this? Mounts 51 and 52 are intact on the main wreck. We saw 53, we saw 54. Process of elimination, the remains of this mount could be 55.
In October 1944, the destroyer USS Johnston was part of a small task force called Taffy 3, and they were left behind when their fleet's main force went off to chase what turned out to be a Japanese diversion. Okay, so left on their own, they confronted a huge Japanese force that was threatening to cut off the supply lines for an amphibious landing led by General Douglas MacArthur on the island of Leyte in the Philippines. The Johnston's captain, Commander Ernest E. Evans, sacrificed his ship and charged into a massive line of Japanese warships in order to protect the American landing force. Now, the Johnston was hammered by enemy fire and eventually sank, with over half of the ship's 327 crew members lost, including Commander Evans. And the pivotal Battle of Leyte Gulf, it went on to be considered the largest naval battle of World War II. Now, in the last 75 years, this legend of the USS Johnston remains at the top of the discussion of one of the bravest efforts in all of the armed forces. But no one really knew where the wreck of the Johnston could be located. They just knew it was off the coast of the Philippines. That was until 2019, when a team of explorers from Vulcan Incorporated discovered pieces of a sunken warship believed to be the USS Johnston under approximately 4 miles of water. That's over 21,000 feet down. But there was nothing found that could truly confirm the identity. In fact, they thought the ship completely broke apart and was scattered all over the ocean floor.
Park Stephenson was a member of the Caladan Oceanic Expedition that eventually located the hull of the USS Johnston in 2021. He was in the submersible that went 4 miles under the ocean to explore the shipwreck. Parks is now the director of the USS Kidd Veterans Museum, which operates a surviving World War II Fletcher-class destroyer.
What you see right here,
He's comparing that debris on the ocean floor with its preserved
right
counterparts still visible on the USS Kidd.
Okay, Parks,
Let's
show
get
me
over
this.
Vulcan found the remains of 2, possibly 3 5-inch gun mounts in the debris field. So this is one of them. Now what you're looking at here, at first you might think that's a gun barrel.
Right,
But no,
I did. When I
that's
first
a
saw it.
gun barrel.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing is a mount upside down, and the mount is on the deck house. So which mount is this? Well, this one was easy, because not only does this match the deck house here in front of Mount 53, but also it caught this catwalk that goes from this deck house to this deck house. It caught that portion of walkway plus the trunk of the torpedo crane.
And that's this right here.
And that's what this is.
What everyone thinks is a gun barrel is actually the pillar that crane is resting on.
And this is upside down, of course, in here. I think the crane head is buried in the sediment there. So this was easy to identify. This one was Mount 53.
And this is that section of catwalk that you're saying is going between the two housings.
Yes, right here.
Okay.
This catwalk is right there. And the mount itself is missing the 2 covers. These are for the square windows.
I've been lucky enough to come to Houma, Louisiana to check out the USS Kidd Fletcher-class destroyer in dry dock, which is cool enough. Today I got Park Stephenson here, director of the USS Kidd Veterans Museum. I've got some photos from the debris field of the USS Johnston was first discovered. Showed them to Parks. And he's going to take us to various parts of the ship, show us things that appeared in the lens of the ROV when they first found what looked like just bits of trash on the floor of the ocean. Turns out to have been debris from the USS Johnston. So let's see what we can find. Okay, Parks, show me this.
Yeah, that's one of them. That's a mount. That's the remains of a mount. Because look at this panel right here.
Yeah.
See the oval hatch? This would be the pointer position. This is the left side of the mount as you're looking at it. And then here is that optical port right here. You see the oval one and the square right there? But anyway, that was how, look at this, this is already, they just painted it, it's full of water already, it's going to rust. Oh well, son of a bitch. I can't come out here after every rainstorm.
Would you just be tempted to drill a hole at the bottom as a drain hole? I mean, because you're going to need to do that in Baton Rouge, right?
Yeah, that might be an idea actually.
So,
anyway.
So you would be open to doing something like that even though it wasn't really the way the ship was?
Yeah, because
it's preservation.
Back in the day, you had 300 men to take care of this ship on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. And when they weren't fighting, they were chipping away and painting. That's the life of a destroyerman. So if something like this did happen, you know, like you can see here, even though this has been freshly painted,
yeah,
you can see that, you know, there's in a shipyard you're going to have lots of metal flakes from things, and they're rusty, and they're going to land in here, and they're going to encourage rust here.
Yeah.
A ship with a crew of 300 men could stay on top of that. Mm-hmm. A maintenance staff of 2 staying ahead of it is not going to cut it. So we may have to make little changes like that to help us stay ahead of the maintenance, because I'd rather have a hole drilled in here to drain collected water here than to lose this to corrosion, lose this whole tray.
What is this?
This is a 5-inch practice loader.
Oh, this is the practice loader.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And there really aren't many of these around.
No, in fact, they tried to take them off the ship. They took kids off, and they said, well, you don't want this. And yeah, we do. This isn't kids. We had to get this off another ship. As they modernized the ships, they didn't feel that the crews needed to train on these things. You know, inside these mounts, these are very restricted, very difficult to train in there.
Yeah.
So that's why this is out here. You're now open up, the guys can move around, they can make mistakes. You can have a chief standing back, evaluating their performance, telling them what they're doing right or wrong. You just don't have that luxury inside the mount itself. The nominal firing rate on a 5-inch mount was 18 shells a minute, but the really good crews could get up to 22 to 25 shells a minute. Samuel B. Roberts at the Battle of Samar, the after mount where Carr was stationed, they were one of the best in the fleet, and they approached 25 shells a minute out of that gun. And during the battle, they used up all of their ammunition.
But they were obviously practicing on something like this.
Yes, yeah. Carr would have had his team out here drilling on this until they got it down to a science. And the whole point was to get as many shells out in as quick a time as possible.
When you went down there, did you happen to see any of these down there?
Well, like I said, the wreck is broken.
Oh, it pretty much broke right
It literally
here.
broke around here. From the aft end of this deck house, aft, everything's wiped off the deck. And I could see their tank tops with a distinctive bolt pattern around the ovals. I could see that in some of the piled up deck that was aft of the main wreck. So that's as far back. This was torn in half, and all of this was gone.
Okay.
This deck house is in the debris field. This deck house is in the debris field underneath the gun. That Mount 53, this is a deck house. It's upside down. Yeah, there you go, there you go. So the mount's up here, the deck house is down here.
Okay.
So this entire deck house was ripped off the ship. We found that on both 53 and 54. And it would have been a part of the explosion because it was all in a fairly contained debris field. Everything forward of that is the main wreck site. Everything after that is in Vulcan's debris field, but it's all twisted, torn metal, and only occasionally do you have some intact artifacts. So when those depth charges went off back aft, it tore everything that had ripped off the ship. The ship ripped in half, and this probably was ripped off about the same time. This went with the after portion, and then when that after portion blew, it just tore everything here into little bits.
And these access ports here, and this little notch here, because the barrel's right there, that's what we're looking at.
Yeah. Johnston's what brought me to Kidd. When I give tours on the ship, I give a tour of both Kidd and Johnston. And I hope it works for the people who come on board to get a history of both ships at the same time.
That's my way of saying let's reconcile.
They asked me about this.
I like that.
Are we supposed to paint it in half? And I go, yep. Oh, they're painting. Yeah. Yeah, they're painting on both sides. We can, Johnston went through a naval surface battle, fighting it out with guns. Kidd took a kamikaze in the side, completely different.
Can you identify?
Okay, that's the remains of a 5-inch mount. And that's going to be 53 or 54. I started to suspect it when I started to notice a pattern in the debris field of Vulcan that, with the exception of the funnels and the mast, everything seemed to come from the stern. So it probably wasn't 51 or 52. I didn't think at the time.
But how do you know that's the mount?
If you go in here and study it enough, you will see some of these support beams in line with the mount.
Let's go there and look at them.
Okay, it was Johnston that led me to Kidd. After the Johnston experience, I quit my previous career and became a museum ships person. I see two ships when I look at this ship, and I try to relay that to the guests who come aboard to visit Kidd.
But you're basically saying the structure that you see here, the ribs, the outline, it's like, well, that's got to be the mount.
Yeah, it's the interior of a mount.
Okay.
Now, we also came across, and I don't know if you have this picture, do you have a picture of a toothed ring?
I did grab that.
Yeah. What we have here, this is the training ring of a 5-inch mount. This is what I'm talking about, the training ring. Training, of course, is...
Left and right.
Yeah, left and right. The degrees that you turn a mount is called training the mount. So that is the training ring for 55. Most importantly, it's torn out of a main deck. That's not a deck house. That's main deck there. Yeah, so it's sitting upside down. Like I said, this is the training ring here.
Okay.
And so that meant, if this is main deck and not a deck house, that means that this would either be mount 55 or mount 51 forward. Identifying this as 55 would ultimately process of elimination. Also by the fact that I knew from the USS Hull battle report that she took a Japanese shell right into the training mount of 55 and it froze it for the duration of the battle. I didn't know for a fact that this would be either 51 or 55 until a little bit later. But there are features in here that show that this is a main deck and not a deck house.
Okay.
So after I figured out it was 55, there's no damage to the ring. The ring's intact and Hull's was damaged. Oh. So that's how I knew this was Johnston and not Hull. Now this is a pile of debris here that definitely comes from a 5-inch gun mount. You can see all kinds of things here. First of all, there's the front face right there that we talked about earlier. What you see right here is this right here. And a lot of these things you can see in here, you can find inside the mount. So this is the remains of a mount, and this one I have to use process of elimination. And of course, it was validated when we found the main wreck. Mounts 51 and 52 are intact on the main wreck. We saw 53, we saw 54. Process of elimination, the remains of this mount could be 55. So this is of, oh wow. This was one of the most corroded areas on Kidd, where everybody comes aboard and they would be faced with a deck that was all rusted out. And all of this has been sandblasted and painted.
Okay, Parks.
Where are we out here?
Show me this.
Oh, okay, yeah. This is the gun captain's cupola. It's a blast shield, basically. You see how these 5-inch mounts are stepped. See, if 54 fires over the gun captain's head, since 55 here, it's going to ring as bells. In the available photos we had at the time of Johnston, it didn't show any of those cupolas on Johnston. But the pictures of Hull showed that she had them on multiple mounts. So when they came across an obvious gun captain cupola in the debris field, they went, well, we don't think Johnston had any, so maybe this is Hull? This is what threw all the doubt into Vulcan. Vulcan thought they had Johnston. They thought they did. They had every intention of coming back to that site and finding the rest of the wreck. We just happened to beat them. But that one picture right there, that threw everything into doubt.
Because they didn't think Johnston had those.
Right. And it wasn't until after that, when we dug around in the National Archives a little bit, we came up with a couple of the photos that showed that Johnston had one on Mount 55. You have Mount 54 in there, right? Because there's a very interesting story there.
Is that Mount 54?
Yeah, that's Mount 54. This is the one I want you to look at, though. So right here, you have an upside down gun mount again. They spent a long time getting multiple angles of this, and it's essentially the blown apart remains of a deck house sticking up, and there's a gun mount underneath it.
Okay.
So this deck house right here is sticking up. Now, again, is this 52 or 54? But there's a beam right here, it's bent. This beam has a very unique shape in it. So I go to Tim Nesmith and I showed him this picture, and he said, there's only one beam like that in the ship. And this is it right here. It's got a very unique shape.
What? Are
See how it comes up like this and this and this?
Yeah,
And that's that. Tim knew the ship enough, he recognized that beam because it's a unique shape and said, that's under 54. So that was one indication that that was Mount 54, was that beam.
Okay.
The other indication, this shows the beam in profile, kind of, right there. See how it does this hook thing here?
Yeah.
And it's torn right there. This is the one I'm looking for. I knew, oh, and there's the beam again. There's a good shot of the beam.
The whole thing.
See, it's upside down.
That guy right there, that curve, is this
curve right here.
Okay.
Right. And this is the only beam in the ship that's like that. This has a double staircase, or double ladder going down from underneath, and there's no other mount that has a double ladder going down right underneath it. While Tim was identifying this mount by this beam, I'm identifying this mount by the fact that the mount is here, and there's the gun barrel, and the gun barrel's intact. And again, going to the Hull's after action report, she took a Japanese shell right in the barrel of Mount 54 that broke it in half. And I have several eyewitness statements.
Wasn't it like rolling around on the deck?
I have several eyewitness statements saying that that severed barrel rolled around on deck for a while. So that's pretty much accepted.
I think I remember reading that.
So if this beam says this is Mount 54, and this Mount 54 has an intact barrel, based on this, it's definitely Johnston.
Okay, I'm going to show you one more thing.
Okay.
Okay. What's that?
Molly, what is that?
That is a floater net.
Basket. Yes.
Okay, show me.
Let's see if there's any. Did they take them off?
Right there.
Oh, no, there's one. Yep.
Well, that's what this is?
Yeah.
Oh, you got to be kidding me.
Nope.
It looks so different in the, although it's probably bent up.
Yeah, it's bent up.
Okay.
And you know what it is, right?
They had I don't know, inflatable pieces of wood strung along ropes, and they would put them in these baskets. So if the ship sinks, the floater nets just float out, and that way the men can hold on, keep them together.
During battle, a lot of shrapnel can tear apart your life rafts. They could have chunks taken out of them and still float, but again, in a battle, you couldn't really depend upon them. This was a very cheap and automatic way of giving guys at sea something to hang on to, because you'd have this netting up here interspersed with flotation. Some of them were cork, some of them were early plastic, that would, just like she said, lift out of the basket as the ship sank, and then it would spread out over the ocean, and then you swim over to them and you entangle yourself in them, and that's how most of the guys who went into the water after the Battle of Samar, that's how they survived for 53 hours, hanging on to this thing.
For a blow-by-blow computerized analysis of the battle damage sustained by the USS Johnston, check out this video.